Welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. Restrictions imposed by the RBI on the Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank created panic among thousands of depositors today. Account holders cannot withdraw more than ₹1,000 from their accounts in the Cooperative Bank for the next 6 months. All business operations have also ceased. Now, while it's not clear what exactly has led to this decision by the RBI, we do know some irregularities have taken place and NPAs have been higher than the previous year. The other important aspect is also that the 36-year-old Cooperative Bank is relatively a better performing one in Maharashtra. Till recently, there were reports of the Mapasa Cooperative Bank merging with PMC. And the Cooperative Bank also managed to turn a profit of almost 100 crore rupees in the last financial year. So what went wrong at PMC, and what about lakhs of depositors who can't withdraw their money for now? We'll get you their voices as well. But before we begin the debate, let's hear what the MD of the bank, Joy Thomas, said to ET Now in an exclusive conversation.
These restrictions have come because of certain increase in the non-performing assets. We have been given 6 months, so we are sure that even before that we will be able to relax the directive.
Is it that it's only after 6 months that RBI will take this away, or there is a possibility that if the NPAs go down in 2 months or 3 months, the restriction?
They can even, we are able to perform even tomorrow, they can take it. So that is the guideline part. Even before that also we have to show the performance and take the relaxation out.
What can be done here to make sure maybe that there's chaos at the branches at this point of time? How can that be averted?
Those who had trust and faith in us is shaken, and this reaction is but natural, that when somebody is not getting even more than 1,000 for 6 months, there is going to be that, and we understand and we feel that. But I am not, justifying anything. But only thing is that we are standing strong, and with all these difficulties, we will be able to come out.
जो हमारा पेट्रोल का पैसा 10-10 लाख रुपए पड़ा है, वो हमको कब मिलेगा? हमारा पेट्रोल कब आएगा? और जितने बिजनेसमैन सर्विसमैन हैं जिनके फिक्स डिपॉजिट हैं, उनको कब मिलेगा पैसा?
किसका शादी है, किसका मम्मी बीमार है, उसके दवाई के लिए पैसा चाहिए, तभी भी बोलते कि नहीं है।
मम्मी को पैरालाइज है, अटैक है, पैरालाइज पूरा वन साइड, उनके भी एफडी वगैरह सब है, वो भी मेरे भी पैसे हैं सब। अभी मेरे को आज इतने जरूरत है पैसे, उसके लिए मैं आने लगा, तो मुझे अभी ये
ऐसा करेंगे तो भरोसा उड़ जाएगा जनता का। मेरा एफडी को भी 15 दिन बाकी है। मैंने उनको बोला आप एक काम करो, अगर जो आपको फाइन लेना हो फाइन ले लो, बाकी पैसा मेरे को दे दो, मैं दूसरे बैंक में या कुछ और करूँ। मेरा बहुत ज़रूरत था इस टाइम। अभी 15 दिन के बाद मेरे को लड़के का फीस भरना है, घर का और प्रॉब्लम्स है सारा। तो वो बोलती है कि नहीं, आपका जो मैच्योरिटी हो रहा है 15 दिन के बाद में, तो वो हम आपको फिर से रिन्यू कर देंगे आपको।
So a lot of questions. Of course, depositors and account holders have had a very bad day. Their hard-earned savings are stuck in the bank, at least for the next 6 months. They don't know what's going to happen in the future. And it also raises a larger question on the credibility of cooperative banks. I'm now joined for more on this by Mukesh Jain, corporate lawyer, Maithili Busnumat, consulting editor at ET Now, and of course, expert on all things banking. I'm also speaking today with Sujoy Kantawala, advocate in the High Court. Thank you to all of you for joining us on this show. I'm going to start with Mukesh Jain. Mukesh, if you can tell us what are the options now available for these depositors, considering that there is a 1 lakh rupee insurance that each bank account has, according to what the management has told us.
See, the insurance is a little far cry. I don't think that we will need to resort to that. It's a systemically very important bank. It has deposits of more than 11,000 crore rupees, 137 branches spread over 7 states. So this bank can't go down. But having said that, for the time being, there's going to be hardship for the depositors, because Reserve Bank of India, in order to take stock of the position of the bank and the way forward, has imposed a sort of moratorium on withdrawal of funds, on sale of property, and things like that, so that a stock may be taken of what the position is, how bad it is, and what are the steps that need to be taken. And though the moratorium is for 6 months, it's not necessary that this 1,000 rupees limit will continue for that long. Maybe 2 weeks and it will be relaxed. Gradually, it will be relaxed as we get a better idea of how the things are moving. Coming to the deposit insurance that the depositors have, that eventuality will arise if the bank goes down,
Oh.
which a systemically important bank like this
Hmm.
is not likely. In all probability, I'm saying in all certainty, the bank will either be bouncing back of its own,
Okay.
or in worst case scenario, it will be merged with a bigger bank.
Okay, Maitri, I want to come to you, and just a very cursory look at the financials of the bank shows that it is not as bad as some of its other peers in the cooperative banking space. It earned a total income of about 1,300 crore rupees last fiscal, profits of nearly 100 crore rupees. Its capital adequacy stands at 12.62. They're supposed to have about 10.87 for cooperative banks. So while we don't exactly know what went wrong, I think the greater worry is that this is one of the stronger ones.
Well, yes, but if one were to go by what Mr. Thomas said, I think there is a feeling that the NPAs that have been declared by the bank do not reflect the genuine position of the bank. So if that is the reason, though RBI has not officially disclosed any reason, it's quite possible that RBI does want to take a closer look at the accounts of the bank and then come to a final conclusion. Because the fact is that urban cooperative banks as a class are not very well governed, they're not very well administered, they're not very well run. And the main reason really for that is that they are under the dual control of the Reserve Bank of India and also by the state governments through the Registrar of Cooperative Societies. Now, PMC Bank happens to be what is known as a multi-state cooperative bank. That means it has branches across states. So it is under the Reserve Bank of India and the Central Registrar of Cooperative Societies. Now, this makes it very difficult to have a very good control over urban cooperative banks, and it is why we've seen over the years, there's hardly a single year which doesn't go by without the moratorium and closure of at least a few urban cooperative banks. So this is one class of banks which really needs to be cleaned up, and the RBI has been working over the years to try and clean up this position. But periodically, yes, for the depositors, it is very hard times. And for 6 months, they will have to bear with the pain of not being able to withdraw more than 1,000 rupees. As far as deposit insurance is concerned, yes, they will get it only if the bank goes into liquidation. Let us wait and see what finally happens. But in the past year, if you see, there have been a number of cooperative banks which have been put under moratorium and finally closed.
I have a very simple question, and I'm going to come to you, Sujoy, with this question. If cooperative banks tend to have quote unquote sort of dubious track record, and I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying this, every few years you do hear of cooperative banks shutting down, then why are they still being allowed to function and let people open accounts? Today, to turn around and say that, why didn't these depositors know better is just not fair.
You see, the history of cooperative banks is they are generally controlled by these politicians or groups of people, and they use it as their personal fiefdoms. See the difficulty. I can access my locker, but I can't access my cash. This is the cash of the account holder. It is his hard earned money, it is capital for his business. What is he going to do? Everyone who is over here giving their bites, the people who are going to the bank to withdraw their money, they know that there is one MD of this company who is known as Joy Thomas, but that person, his name is Joy, but there is no joy on the depositors today. The persons whose hard earned money is lying in the account can't be withdrawn. They may need it for various purposes, educational, medical. There is a festive season around the corner. 1,000 rupees, making a mockery of the whole system. And for what? Because the amounts you gave to the other persons, the NPAs, they have defaulted or you can't recover from them on time. Therefore, who has to pay? The account holder, the middle class person. Is this what the banking system is telling us? And here you have the chairman who says, "Nahi, 6 months, please relax, don't worry. Your money is going to ultimately come to you. He is not going to face the problem which the others are facing. Look at the kind of people who are suffering over here. And what do you get in 1000 rupees today? Couple of liters of petrol. On that does a house work? Imagine people who have only one account. One family has 4 or 5 people in the family, all have their accounts in this bank. Where are they going to go for money?
No, so what can be done?
Did
I want
you
to
not
understand.
think of it?
Yeah, no.
They should have borrowed from other banks and seen to it that their account holders get money.
You know, you've actually raised a very valid point, Sujoy. I mean, I don't know about that pun on, you know, Mr. Joy Thomas, that's his name. And to be fair, he spoke to us in a lot of detail. I want to commend actually the fact that we got that interview exclusively. He explained the position to whatever extent he could. But I want to understand the thinking behind such kind of an action. And Maitri, please break this down for all our viewers, some of who may not be following the intricacies of how banking regulation works. But it almost seems cruel today to, you know, the average depositor, that why the RBI would have put this limit of 1000 rupees for 6 months. We all can imagine the situation if it happened to each of us tomorrow, that you suddenly can't access what could be your main account for 6 months completely.
Oh yes, it is a very frightening prospect, Tamanna, if you can't access your funds. And the fact is that most cooperative banks, the deposits come from the relatively less well-off section of society, because cooperative banks are allowed to offer a slightly higher rate of interest as compared to ordinary scheduled commercial banks. So to that extent, it is usually the people who are not so well-off who put their money in cooperative banks. But it is a fact that cooperative banks are not well run. Their financial position is very dubious, and as one of the speakers said, many of them have close nexus with political parties, and that makes it even more difficult for the Reserve Bank of India to truly exercise control, complete control over them. So the RBI has been cognizant of this. In fact, over the years, they have appointed expert committees. There was a vision document on urban cooperative banks, which was set up, in which the RBI signed memorandum of understanding with various state governments in a bid to clean it up. But obviously it hasn't succeeded fully. And I think the only reason why RBI resorts to such measures, because under Section 35A of the Banking Regulation Act, which I could just read out, it says that the RBI, in the public interest and to prevent the affairs of any banking company being conducted in a manner detrimental to the interests of depositors or in a manner prejudicial to the interests of the banking company, can issue directions. So I think here the call that the RBI takes is, which is a lesser evil. If there's a larger danger to the public interest, then it does take the choice of saying that yes, we'll issue a moratorium. Yes, some depositors will suffer, and the suffering is very genuine. But the idea, I think, is to say which is the lesser evil, and in a bid to protect the larger economy, they have resorted to this course.
So, Maitri, explain to us with examples. Explain to us with examples in the most simple term, what could be the worst evil in this case? What could be actually going on for the RBI to have to make this call?
Well, what happens is that banking, you know, every bank lends and borrows from other banks. These are all interbank borrowings and lendings. So in case Madhapura Bank owes a lot of money to some other bank, or some other bank owes a lot of money to Madhapura Bank, there are these linkages. So if Madhapura Bank is not in a position to pay back some other bank, it is quite possible it doesn't have enough money, so they could have a run on the bank. That means everybody wants to take out their money at the same time. And the bank is the bank. So I spoke about Madhapura because that was the first bank which was really a large cooperative bank, which went down in 2001 and really set the cat amongst the pigeons as far as urban cooperative banks were concerned. That was the bank which was involved in the Ketan Parekh scam. So that is what was uppermost in everybody's mind. So the fear really is that if you have a run on the bank and the bank is not able to pay any of its depositors, it will be far worse. So you ration out and pay every depositor 1,000 rupees. And in the meanwhile, the RBI does a true audit of the bank's affairs and ensures if the bank is to go down, it goes down in a more orderly fashion. As I said, the idea is of choosing the lesser evil.
Okay, so, you know, which makes you think that the situation might really be worse. Perhaps, Mukesh Jain, we could have seen more details, more clarity on what's happening. And I just want to understand the legal position. You spoke about insurance being the last option. We know that in this particular bank, insurance exists to up to 1 lakh rupees per account, which might be the last resort. But is there any government-backed agency who by law has to ensure that every depositor gets their money back? Or is this just a case of hoping that the right thing happens. I want to understand the legal position on this. Mukesh?
See, in case of commercial banks, there is a implicit sovereign guarantee, which is actually being incorporated in the new vision document also. But that does not extend to cooperative banks. Having said that, if a bank has to eventually go down, Madam talked about Madhavpura Bank, which is a classic example of a large cooperative bank going down. After 17 years, the depositors have been able to get only 2 lakh rupees per depositor, which is 52% of their deposits. But things have gone a long way after that. And the systemic importance of a bank like PMC can't be ignored. It's a bank with 11,000 crores deposits. Therefore, regardless of whether there is any statutory protection or not apart from DICGC, the fact of the matter is that these things are always handled in a very, very organized and sensitive manner. And banks like these are not generally allowed to go down. As a matter of fact, in some cases, even DICGC chips in, even large institutional depositors chip in, so as to ensure that there is a semblance of balance between assets and liabilities. Reason being, when a bank is amalgamated with another bank, the transferee bank has to take over all assets, liabilities, deposit liability, etc. So in a case like this, number one, we do not know, though, how deep the rot is. But given the total size of the bank, it is absolutely unlikely that the depositors will finally be left high and dry.
Okay, absolutely unlikely sounds reassuring, but it doesn't sound like 100%.
Nothing happens till it happens.
And we don't know the timeline. We don't know the timeline because look at some of the examples. You've had cooperative banks which went down in 2017 and depositors are still waiting. So Joy, is there any kind of legal action that people can take, that depositors can take? What are their options, considering a lot of these depositors come from low income groups? I mean, since this morning I've heard of stories of a domestic help, a watchman in a building, a retired person's complete life savings, a housing society's funds. These are just some of the stories anecdotally that I've heard of all of these people's money being stuck. And you can't tell them that, okay, something will happen, wait. Can they do anything about it, or just they have to hope that the authorities do something right?
See, a normal middle class citizen or a working class person is only concerned with the fact that भैया मुझे मेरा पैसा दे दो वापस. I deposit the money in the bank because it is the safest place on earth. That is the concept. That is why people deposit money in the banks. Now, if these things are going to happen, and I tell you that there is no guarantee, there may be all sorts of statutory documents which may be available, but ultimately a representative suit will have to be filed in the High Court, which will take maybe 20 years to reach. Do the account holders have that patience? And is it going to trickle? They take 1,000 rupees today, 2,000 rupees today. Is this what account holders who have trusted the bank get in return? And which heads are going to roll? My friend Mr. Jain just now said we don't know the extent of rot in the bank. There will be a forensic audit. RBI at their own sweet juncture will look into all the files. Who is going to pay for all the lost time? And who is going to be accountable? Mr. Joy Thomas may come on your channel and give all sorts of assurances. But here the account holders want to see the color of their own money. Yeah. They are not borrowing from anyone.
Yeah.
It's their own money.
The
bank cannot siphon off or keep other people's money and give it to other NPAs. They are meant to be accountable.
No, absolutely. We don't know what happened in this case.
There should be an SIT appointed.
I'm just, Sujoy, I'm just, I don't want to preempt because I do not know exactly what has happened in this particular case. I do not know exactly what has happened in this particular case, but I want to come to the larger issue of cooperative banks because unfortunately the track record has been terrible. in a lot of cooperative banks, especially in Maharashtra, these are banks which have huge political clout, which have huge political patronage, and are riddled with scams. Maitri, you spoke about 2001 Madhepura Cooperative Bank, but we've seen a slew of them. It's almost like an annual sort of a, reckoning. You know, 2 or 3 are going to go down. My question is then why aren't depositors warned not to use these banks? Can this kind of a laxity of standards be allowed? Isn't it time to really relook at this whole cooperative bank system?
Well, yes, the cooperative bank system sector really needs to be cleaned up big time. But the problem is, because of the close linkage with political interests, it becomes very difficult really to finally close them down. RBI very often takes action only at the last stage, and precisely because this often becomes too late to really do anything to remedy the situation. So if it is a sufficiently large cooperative bank, and PMC happens to be one of the top 10 cooperative banks in terms of size, then typically what the RBI will do is try and foist it on some other bank, ensure that a merger takes place and try and save some of the pain. But it is a fact that many of the smaller cooperative banks are allowed to go down, unsung, unheard of, and small depositors do suffer. So I think it's high time that the RBI and the state governments and also the central government sit down together and realize that this sector needs to be cleaned up. And to the extent that such incidents turn the spotlight on cooperative banks and the need to do something about the sector, maybe some larger good will be served. But in the interim, yes, I'm afraid there's very little choice but for the depositors who suffer the pain. In fact, just in May this year, in a cooperative bank in Goa, was similarly, a directive was issued by the Reserve Bank of India, and depositors were not allowed to withdraw more than 5,000 rupees a day. So this is something that happens very, I wouldn't say often, but pretty.
That's the thing, Maithili, the bank you're talking about, the Mapsa Cooperative Bank, PMC was supposed to be taking it over and merging it into itself as per some reports.
No, this is not the Matsa Cooperative. It's called the Madgaon Urban Cooperative Bank.
Okay.
So this again was a bank which again was put under direction because RBI, mind you, in all these cases, it has not cancelled the licenses yet. So the bank continues to have the license while the RBI investigates and finds out how deep is the rot. But I think it's very important for political parties, state governments and the union government sit down and realize that you need to allow the RBI to do its job. If you're going to interfere in the supervision, it becomes very difficult for the RBI to step in time. And by the time the RBI steps in, it's much too late. So I think this is an opportunity for us to clean up. Yes, there will be enormous pain to the depositors. But I'm afraid, as I said, because of systemic issues, the RBI had to step in to prevent a larger collapse of the banking system.
Okay, so the RBI has to understand, the people have to understand that the RBI would have had very little choice except to take this decision. I just want to come back to the larger picture and the future of cooperative banks, because right now if I was an account holder in another cooperative bank, I would be very worried. And at no point do I want to sound like I'm encouraging a run on any bank. But for the benefit of our viewers who are tuning in, I want to understand if they should worry about any deposits they have currently in other cooperative banks. What should they look out for? What should they check? In fact, let me come back to you, Maithili, with that question.
Well, I think every depositor of a cooperative bank will have to keep a very careful eye on what is happening in the cooperative bank. Look at the audited accounts. Check to see what is the position, losses, what is the kind of NPAs they declare. But unfortunately, the problem is that in many cases, the annual reports and the balance sheets do not give a correct picture, as in the case of PMC Bank. So I'm afraid it will have to be caveat emptor. And that is a very unfortunate thing, because the people who deposit in cooperative banks, not only in cooperative banks, but even in other commercial banks, really do not have the financial acumen or the financial literacy to truly understand the financial position of the banks. But in the case of the other scheduled commercial banks, most of them are considered too large to fail. So the RBI will not allow them to go down. But that is not the case in the case of cooperative banks, urban cooperative banks. So I'm afraid RBI, in the larger interest of the public, particularly the poorer sections of society, must ensure that the health of these urban cooperative banks, the financial health, is made as good as possible. And therefore, I think it is important, given the political interests involved, that, as I said, state government, central government and the RBI sit down together and clean up the mess, because there definitely is a mess in the urban corporate sector. But for the rest, it will have to be caveat emptor, I'm afraid. Harsh lessons, but how the market operates.
The other true fact is, Sujoy, let me come to you on this point, that the big banks, the ones that are too big to fail, are not very easy for, common people from poorer sections to even access and open accounts in. Cooperative banks become attractive for two reasons. One is that they offer slightly higher deposit rates, and this may have changed a bit after the whole Jan Dhan Yojana, but it's not always easy for, a lot of people without that kind of financial backing, without, stable jobs, etc., to access these banks, which is why they turn to cooperative banks in the first place. They just seem more accessible. So who takes the responsibility for the fact that all of these depositors are today stuck?
So therefore, I agree with what Maithili just said, that caveat emptor. Caveat emptor means buyer must be beware. So therefore, now the customer has to be beware before going into the bank whether his money is going to be safe. Does he deserve it? Does he deserve to have sleepless nights that his money which he has safely deposited in a bank, that bank may go down tomorrow, or the bank may tomorrow declare a moratorium that only 1000 rupees? No. Why should anyone deserve that? Today the reach of other nationalized banks is throughout India. I am telling you, even in small towns and villages you have SBI and Bank of India. I would suggest that people, even if they get a little less rate of interest, or even if they have to wait in a longer queue, they should start transferring their money from these cooperative banks, because we don't know the future of other cooperative banks, and therefore I wouldn't blame people to be wary of other cooperative banks. Looking at the example today that they are seeing, today entire nation is covered by social media and popular TV channels like yours. People are watching these shows. They are very well aware of what is happening. So therefore, if they want to save their money, they have to take the appropriate action, because nobody is going to come to their help. That's the bitter truth and bitter pill, which if they want to swallow, they can.
Mukesh Jain, I want you to come in on that point. That today there is, why should depositors trust what is happening in cooperative banks? And instead of the RBI and the Finance Ministry and government agencies treating this as just another cooperative bank which is in trouble, this should be an opportunity to relook at the entire system and secure deposits of those who are right now with their hard-earned money in the cooperative banking system.
You could not have been more right. Madam talked about caveat emptor. Now, the depositors of cooperative banks as a class are not so well informed. They do not have the ability to discern as to how strong or weak the cooperative bank is. My next point is, I don't agree that the government and the RBI are treating it like any other bank failing. That's a little unkind observation to make. The RBI has stepped in, and though this moratorium is extremely painful, but it's a part of an ameliorative process, because the entire effort is to save the bank. Having said that, the larger question remains whether the cooperative banks are an appropriate destination for your hard-earned money. I would only say that we should try to disseminate as much information as we can on the subject. After that, it's after all a matter of individual choice.
Mr. Jain, I'm sorry, I'm just going to come in on that point. It's not really a matter of individual choice, because all of these individuals don't have that information. If there is a licensed business out there in the market, then I assume they have, the ability to run that business.
Therefore, an extreme radical step could be to see, you can't close these banks, because if 11,000 crores is deposited by the depositors in PMC Bank, 11,000 crore cash is not lying in their coffers. It has been deployed for various purposes, rightly or wrongly. I'm not on that. But the question is that today, if there's a run on these banks, even relatively healthy banks will go down. Therefore, if these banks are so much dangerous for the system, so systemically dangerous, then let a policy decision be taken at the government level.
No, that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. I'm not saying do anything, radical, but I'm asking that can we just let this go on happening? Can we just
Certainly
let this
not.
go on happening, saying, oh no, poor depositors? We don't even know the extent of pain people will have. They have no backup, they have no insurance, they have to wait for this 1 lakh rupees. No one knows anything right now. Yes, Sujoy.
See,
Yes, Sujoy. Let me just get in a view from Sujoy. Yeah.
sure.
Tamanna, imagine a person, imagine a citizen like us or a depositor, middle class depositor like us, who needs couple of lakh of rupees urgently for medical treatment. Where does he go? Tell me, where does he go? Does he borrow at some exorbitant, he goes to a Pathan and borrow at an exorbitant interest when he knows that 15-20 lakhs of his are lying in that bank account? And then wait for RBI like a Hindi movie to come at the end and say that nahi, abhi now we have come at the last scene. That is what RBI is doing. RBI should have been watching this from before. They should have prevented this kind of thing happening. What is 1,000 rupees? Can any of my fellow panelists even try to understand what is 1,000 rupees today? What do you get in 1,000 rupees? They have made a mockery of the account holders over there. Look at the plight of these account holders. Who is going to answer? Who is going to give those answers? Mr. Joy Thomas? Sorry, no. He is not being able to do that.
Maithili, I want
And that
you to
is the anguish which everyone is facing today.
Yeah, no, there is anguish, no doubt. My point is, let this not just be one more cooperative bank has gone, bust story. If these banks are not safe to put your money in, then people should not be allowed to put their money in. They should not have a license to run if they are again and again failing. You cannot have different standards and say, oh, too bad, you should have known better. Yes, Maithili.
Oh, certainly. I think the RBI inspection has repeatedly been found wanting, and I agree entirely that the RBI should have been much more watchful. And even though its hands are to some extent tied because of the dual control, the fact is that its supervision clearly was not up to the mark. So at the same time, it's also important that you ensure greater financial literacy amongst people, so that people know that in the case of urban cooperative banks, the supervision is not as effective as it should be because of political interference. So I think a combination of better supervision by RBI, greater financial literacy, and RBI stepping in at an earlier moment, and the state government also cooperating with the RBI whenever the RBI finds something missing. It has to be a combination of factors. And I think this is an opportune moment when incidents like this happen, that we try and really clear up the act so you don't have another PMC bank. Unfortunately, in the urban cooperative sector, we've seen it is not just one bank. We don't seem to learn our lessons again and again. So I think it is a call for both RBI, governments, people, everybody to act and ensure that we don't have another PMC, because I agree the distress at the individual level is far too severe and it's very unfair. It's just not correct that we should inflict this on people. So I think we should ask questions of the RBI, of the state government, of the central government, and we must ensure that people are financially literate and know that there are these dangers. But clearly, supervision must improve.
Absolutely. I hope to take this discussion further in the days to come, because this is an important subject. The people whose money are stuck, and really it's not fair for anyone's money to be stuck. There has to be a check and balance in place. If there is a system that's not working, we need to re-look at it instead of letting it continue and hope for the best. I want to thank all of you for joining us on the first debate this evening, and we will of course continue to track the PMC story right here on ET Now. When I come back, I'm talking about a girl who has shaken the world with 3 words. She's asking, how dare you? How dare you play with her future and the future of millions of children and youngsters across the world? We're talking about Greta Thunberg, and we're coming back to speak to some of our own climate crisis warriors. 2 of them are joining us in the studio today. I'm also going to be speaking with Ridhima Pandey, one of the 16 children who have filed an official complaint at the United Nations, demanding that world leaders listen to them. These are the experts on the show this evening, the voices of the future that matter. I'm coming back with that chat. Don't go away.